This country was mostly wild pasture and as naked as the back of your hand. I was little and homesick and lonely, and my mother was homesick and nobody paid any attention to us. So the country and I had it out together, and by the end of the first autumn, that shaggy grass country had gripped me with a passion I have never been able to shake.
Willa Cather is one of the most important American novelists. Seen as a regional writer for decades after her death in 1947, critics have increasingly identified Cather as a canonical American writer, the peer of authors like Hemingway, Faulkner, and Wharton. While Cather is closely associated with the prairie of her Nebraska youth, 6 of her 12 novels were set in a fictional version of Red Cloud, where Cather spent her formative years. Her writing includes settings as diverse as the desert Southwest, 17th century Quebec, and the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, among others.
I had searched for books telling about the beauty of the country I loved, its romance and heroism and strength and courage of its people that had been plowed into the very furrows of its soil, and I did not find them. And so I wrote O Pioneers.
It was 1883, and Willa was 9 years old when her parents, Charles and Mary Virginia Cather, moved their family to Webster County, Nebraska, from Virginia. Prior to encroachment by settlers, the Kitcahawkee Band of the Pawnee farmed and hunted buffalo along the Republican River for centuries.
Before 1860, civilization did no more than nibble at the eastern edge of the state, along the river bluffs. Lincoln, the present capital, was open prairie, and the whole of the Great Plain to the westward was still a sunny wilderness, where the tall red grass and the buffalo and the Indian hunter were undisturbed.
The Cathers settled northwest of Red Cloud on the Divide, the high country between the river valleys. There, Cather was plunged into a rough and exciting new society, where immigrant families with their exotic languages and old-world cultures lived side by side with farmers, laborers, and cowboys, all intent on making a new life in a new land. She absorbed the languages and customs they brought with them to America.
I think that most of the basic material a writer works with is acquired before the age of 15. That's the important period, when one's not writing. Those years determine whether one's work will be poor and thin or rich and fine.
These early memories and relationships shaped Cather's writing as much as any single influence in her life. More than just using the region as a setting in her fiction, she routinely populated her stories with characters who resembled the people she first encountered there as a child.
Colonies of European people, Slavonic, Germanic, Scandinavian, Latin, spread across our bronze prairies like the daubs of color on a painter's palette. They brought with them something that this neutral New World needed, even more than the immigrants needed land. Unfortunately, their American neighbors were seldom open-minded enough to understand the Europeans or to profit from their older traditions.
Not everyone who settled in the prairie was suited for farm life. The Cathers stayed on the farm less than 2 years before moving into town. They rented a small house on Cedar Street, and Willa eventually was given a room on the north side of the attic, separate from the larger space shared by the other children. Cather recalled her room later as the fictional Thea Kronberg in The Song of the Lark.
It was the end room of the wing and was not plastered, but was snugly lined with soft pine. The ceiling was so low that a grown person could reach it with the palm of the hand, and it sloped down on either side. There was only one window, but it was a double one and went to the floor. In October, while the days were still warm, Thea and Tilly papered the room, walls and ceiling in the same paper, small red and brown roses on a yellowish ground.
2 prominent Red Cloud citizens who made an enduring impression on Cather were Union Army veteran Silas Garber and his wife Lyra. Garber was a leader among Red Cloud's founders, and later served 2 terms as Nebraska governor. He became a successful businessman and built this bank, which today houses an exhibit about Red Cloud's history and Cather's A Lost Lady, the story of Captain Daniel Forrester and his beautiful younger wife Marion, both modeled after the Garbers. The book and others that follow highlight the implausibility of living inconspicuously in a small town.
On the sidewalks along which everybody comes and goes, you must, if you walk abroad at all, at sometimes pass within a few inches of the man who cheated and betrayed you, or the woman you desire more than anything else in the world. Her skirt brushes against you. You say good morning and go on. It is a close shave.
In addition to the Garbers, dozens of acquaintances, each with a story to tell, inspired Cather's characters. There were Willa's neighbors, the Miners, who lived here in a home now preserved as a historic house museum. The Miner family became the model for the Harling family in Cather's popular and critically acclaimed novel, My Antonia. She dedicated the book to the daughters of the Miner household, Carrie and Irene. A Czech immigrant named Annie Sedelic was employed as a domestic servant by the Miner family. Annie moved into town from a dugout on the Divide following her father's death by suicide. Her resilience in the face of adversity is depicted in My Antonia. A visit to the Pavelka farmstead today provides a glimpse into rural life in the early 20th century and brings a memorable setting from the final scenes of the novel into view.
Antonia and I went up the stairs first and the children waited. We were standing outside talking when they all came running up the steps together. Big and little, towheads and gold heads and brown and flashing little naked legs. A veritable explosion of life after the dark cave into the sunlight.
Nebraska in the late 1800s was a place of pioneers and possibility, but the cultural norms and expectations of 19th century America were present in Red Cloud. Women were expected to raise families and tend the home, while men worked to build their social standing and their fortune. Willa Cather no doubt understood these roles, but didn't feel bound by them. As a teenager, Cather planned to become a surgeon, a profession thought by many best suited for men. Her youth was spent exploring the possible selves she might become in later life, whether she was accompanying the local doctor on his rounds, learning the newspaper trade, or living vicariously through dramatic performance, on stage herself or from the audience. Tiny Red Cloud might seem an unlikely place to encounter the arts, but in fact the town was home to many cultured citizens. The center of culture in Red Cloud was the Opera House, where traveling companies performed a rotation of popular plays and operas.
When I go about among little Nebraska towns, the thing I miss most is the Opera House. No number of filling stations or moving picture theaters can console me for the loss of the Opera House.
Cather's beloved Opera House is preserved today as a gallery space and performing arts venue. Another quintessential backdrop in Cather's life and writing is the Burlington Depot, a place where visitors can now explore the history of the railroad and its role in settling the plains. In Cather's day, Red Cloud was a crossroads. Passenger trains from Kansas City, Denver, and Chicago came through at regular intervals. The train station often symbolized escape to the wider world in Cather's writing.
The station platform was full of restless young people glancing up the tracks, looking at their watches as if they could not endure their own town a moment longer.
Cather left Red Cloud in 1890 and enrolled at the University in Lincoln. Her plan to become a doctor changed after a professor published one of Cather's essays in a local newspaper. After college, Cather spent a decade in Pittsburgh working as a journalist and teacher. She later relocated to New York City and became the managing editor at McClure's magazine. The publication was a leading literary and political journal known for its muckraking journalism. After the publication of her first novel, Cather left the magazine to find her own voice in her fiction, which led her to draw upon her Red Cloud memories. The town was given many different names in Cather's fiction: Blackhawk, Moonstone, Haverford, Sweetwater, Hanover, and Frankfurt, among others. Though Cather left Red Cloud behind to make her way in the world, the community was invariably in her thoughts. In a letter to a lifelong friend, she put it this way:
I'm not exaggerating when I confide to you that I would rather go home to Red Cloud than to any of the beautiful cities in Europe where I used to love to go.
This church is a representation of Willa Cather's continuing ties to her hometown. After she left Nebraska in 1896, she never lived in Red Cloud again, but returned home for visits. She was a member of Grace Episcopal Church, where she donated 2 stained glass windows in memory of her parents. After her death in 1947, memorial services were held there. Cather was laid to rest in the old burying ground in Jaffrey Center, New Hampshire. Her partner, Edith Lewis, selected her final resting place and designed her tombstone, which features these memorable words from my Antonia: "That is happiness, to be dissolved into something complete and great." Willa Cather is a clear and singular voice of the American experience. Her writing explores complicated historical moments with themes that remain relevant to our lives today. Cather's characters, whether at their best, their worst, or their most vulnerable, ensure that her writing will endure. While Willa Cather stands today as the lone Pulitzer Prize winner in the National Statuary Hall collection of the U.S. Capitol, above all, she was a creator of her own persona, of her own career, and of literary worlds that reach well beyond Nebraska into the depths of the human heart.
There are only 2 or 3 human stories, and they go on repeating themselves as fiercely as if they never happened before. Like the larks in this country that have been singing the same 5 notes over for thousands of years.
Today, Red Cloud is home to the largest collection of nationally designated historic sites dedicated to an American author. Guided town, country, and prairie tours provide visitors with an immersive experience. The National Willa Cather Center houses a large and growing collection of photographs and correspondence, as well as personal and family possessions. Cather's legacy is alive, thanks to the support of people across the country and abroad. When you become a member, you help provide classroom resources for teachers, preserve historic sites associated with Cather's life and work, conserve the Willa Cather Memorial Prairie, care for these priceless collections, and allow a living memorial to operate for the benefit of generations to come.